Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's time for another episode of Health Talks with Dr. Trin. The one show, the only show that shows you a path to a healthier life and how to tweak what you have been doing and maybe turn it into something better here. That's what we're going to talk about today, I think. Dr. Trin, is that the topic for today? Repurposing stuff and reusing it?
Yeah, there's many topics we can chat about today. I am excited to have Dr. Gupta on with us today. He's the clinical professor of medicine at UC Irvine. He is an entrepreneur, an inventor of medicines. I believe too. In the last 5 years, didn't you have a few of your medicines that you worked on get to FDA approval, Dr. Gupta?
Yes, indeed. So thank you very much for this invite and really a pleasure and very happy to share my views on this disease. And indeed, my passion is to identify unmet medical needs and then try and find solution to these needs. And in this regard, I invented two drugs which are really in an unrelated field. These are in the field of iron deficiency. And these are not for most of the patients can be treated by taking iron pills by mouth, but
Right.
many patients don't tolerate iron and they need intravenous iron.
Hmm.
That includes my wife. So she's received intravenous iron a couple of times, and the iron that I have invented, it is given directly into the circulation. And we have two forms of it, one delivered through the dialysis solution
Mhm.
to hemodialysis patients, and the other is directly injected into the bloodstream. And both were approved by the FDA, the first one in 2015 and the next one in 2020.
I said I wasn't going
Amazing.
to talk much today, but I have to ask a question there. So, iron deficiency that's so severe you have to take it intravenously. You can't just take iron supplements or iron rich food. You have to take it intravenously.
Indeed, because a lot of patients are intolerant to taking iron pills.
Hmm.
So they get a lot of GI upset,
Right.
especially they get constipated severely, many of them. And then they have heartburn and indigestion, loss of appetite. So therefore, quite a few patients require intravenous iron.
Wow. Had no idea it was that severe here.
Yeah, we've given a few, especially with the severe iron deficiencies, that where we need very rapid buildup of iron. We've given it IV. Yes.
Mhm.
So your drug is then, is that something you license to somebody? Do you sell it to somebody? What happens when you come up with a drug? Somebody's got to make it and dispense it.
Right. I actually invented this drug in 1995, and
Wow.
it took 20 years to bring it from bench to bedside.
Oh my
Wow.
goodness. From bench to bedside. I like that term here. 20 years so we know that there's people out there suffering and there's something that could help them. Is this just safety regulations and clinical trials, all the stuff Dr. Trin does, or is it just the intransigence and the slow moving of the drug industry to ramp up and do something?
I think it's a combination of all of the above.
Hmm.
So when you have a new drug, it takes a lot of clinical trial to ensure that the drug is going to be not only effective, but even more importantly, that it's going to be safe.
Hmm.
And that's the reason why, on an average, it takes about $2.7 billion to
Wow.
bring a new drug to market. That's on an average.
2.7 billion.
That
Wow.
is correct. And
Wow.
it takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years to bring a drug to market. And you're touching upon a very important point that in this pandemic, we don't have those 10, 15, 20 years.
Mm.
Obviously. That's the next question. How can we wait when there's something severe happening? Yeah.
Right, right.
Right.
And and of course, we need to keep on looking for new solutions for COVID. But on the other hand, we cannot ignore the old drugs because many of these drugs can be repurposed. And the two, three effective treatments we know for COVID, one is the steroids,
Yes.
dexamethasone. Again, it's an old drug. And this is unquestionably of benefit in severe COVID patients who are hospitalized.
Yes.
A very old drug. The other drug that has been approved, I don't believe that it is effective, is the drug you refer to, Remdesivir.
Right.
So,
The one that was being touted by our last president, so many others. And it was originally developed for what? Malaria or something?
That's a different one. Yeah.
Oh, that was another one. That was, yeah.
That's hydroxychloroquine. But
Yes.
this particular drug, Remdesivir, again, is developed for viral infections
Right.
in general,
Yes.
and it has been repurposed for COVID. Now, on the other hand, there are a lot of other drugs. A simple drug like aspirin, about which I have written extensively, could be very helpful in COVID,
Yes.
but is not being prescribed. And the reason
Really?
is that blood clotting in the lungs and
Yes.
elsewhere in the body is a very key problem in this disease, which
Yes.
distinguishes this disease from something like a common flu. So clotting is 9 times more common in COVID than it is in influenza.
Wow.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yet, we have not developed effective drugs. And this clotting occurs not just in hospitalized patients, it starts very early in the disease. So you have millions of patients at home who have COVID, their oxygen saturation, when it goes down, they already have clotting occurring in their lungs. And if we could prevent that clotting and we can stop it, then we can stop the oxygen tension and the oxygen transfer that is being impeded. We can improve that and perhaps prevent these patients from getting to severe COVID and getting hospitalized. Because once a patient is hospitalized, their mortality is much, much higher than if we can keep them mild, keep them home.
What do you think
So,
of that, Dr. Trent? I have not
so
heard any. I've heard a million ideas about COVID, a million facts about COVID. I never heard something as simple as aspirin might keep people from from the blood clots developing early on and having them develop a
yes,
severe
it's
case.
a very curious thing. I mean, as physicians, we know that clotting is an issue. We know that aspirin is a blood thinner to prevent clots. I'm not seeing tons of research looking at aspirin specifically for COVID. Why do you think that is, though, Dr. Gupta? Is it because there's, isn't a profit in it? Is it because they prefer new medications in the industry as opposed to the old repurposed medications? I'm not sure, but it makes sense, right? Something like aspirin.
So, what do you think, Dr. Gupta? Why is aspirin being overlooked?
Right, right. So this is a fundamental issue to be addressed with our pharmaceutical industry and the partnership between the industry and the government. So when you have an old medicine, which is generic, which is available very inexpensively, then a pharmaceutical company does not have the appetite and does not have the incentive to invest money into doing clinical trials. And clinical trials are very expensive, as Dr. Tren can testify.
Yes.
When the pharma industry is not interested, then really the government agencies, for example, in the US, the National Institutes of Health, should step up and do that. But NIH, unfortunately, has been very slow to act. And currently, they are conducting clinical trials when more than 700,000 Americans have died,
Yeah.
millions of people have died. There is very significant evidence from observational studies, especially there's one study from analysis of the entire VA system where they found that patients who were taking aspirin for other reasons, like cardiovascular reasons,
Right.
when they got COVID, these people who were taking aspirin, these patients who were taking aspirin, their mortality was much lower than patients who were not taking aspirin when they got COVID. And that's a very large database.
Yes.
But the government has been very slow to invest dollars into studying the existing medications. And in this disease, these what we have in the bloodstream are these platelets.
Right.
And platelets are a key player in this disease. And aspirin quietens down these platelets. And I'm working on another drug which is 100 times more potent than aspirin. It is used for allergies in Japan for the last 20 years. Very safe drug. And it tackles COVID in many different ways. One of the ways is that it quietens down the platelets, so it will prevent clotting.
So
But
you're
the
opening up an interesting debate or discussion here, and I don't know that we're going to get to an answer this morning here, but my jaw, if you could see me on camera, my jaw has dropped. We were so frightened by COVID. We went to such severe steps to restrict it in the beginning, and left, right, and center, every politician in the world, every every company in the world was trying to scramble until we could come up with a vaccine for some stopgap measure, something that would reduce the severity of it, reduce the mortality, make people less sick or keep them from getting sick. Maybe that's a better way to put it here. So that we have, because the hospitals are overwhelmed, we suddenly can't fill up enough emergency beds to handle this, and it's a crisis, and we're going to start rationing care, and people are going to die who otherwise didn't have to die because we just don't have enough space in the hospital, room at the inn. And you're telling me that something as simple as aspirin could have been looked at or used along with other, because I know we were scrambling to look at other off-the-shelf drugs, like this one that got so much attention, and I don't think really had much science behind it. This hydroxychloride or whatever, for a while everybody was, not everybody, but some people were touting like this miracle cure. So why were we so eager to look so far afield and so reluctant to look in our own medicine cabinets?
Right, right. That's a very, very fundamental question. And let me take you back. And so you may remember that President Trump, he established these companies, the Flow Corporation, and he brought in another company to make generics. And the idea
Right.
was that let's repurpose the old medications, let's produce them in large volumes so we can tackle this problem.
Right.
Right.
Now, one thing that emerged in this disease is that it is not the quantum, not the number of viral particles in your nose, throat that determine how you do,
Okay.
how severe the disease is. It's not the viral load.
That's what
The,
the viral load is, how much bad stuff you got, how many germs you got here, whatever they are. Yeah.
is not a major factor, not a
Hmm.
major player in how sick you get. The sickness is dependent on how your body responds to the virus.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You can have a low viral load, but depending on how your body, your immune system, your clotting system, your platelets, how they react to the virus determines how sick you get.
Because some of them create what, Dr. Trin, like you've talked about this before, like a viral storm. They so overreact to this virus.
Cytokine storm. Cytokine storm is
Cytokine storm, yeah.
overreaction of the immune system that harms the body. In addition to trying, to beat the virus, it hurts the body. It's collateral damage from the immune system. So I want to hear more about. So talk to us more about platelets and how it all starts in your throat, because most viral infections, like if you have the flu, the initial symptoms like a sore throat. If you have a cold, the initial symptom is a sore throat, right? COVID, right? It goes in your nose and it goes down, and before it gets to your lungs, it's in your throat.
And it sits there for a while, right? It doesn't immediately go into your lung. Like it sort of It sort
Yeah.
of percolates. It sort of, and then some of us, that's where it stays, and then some of it migrates into your lungs, and bad things start to happen. Why does it? What is that process? Why does it stay there for a while? Why does it move? And why does it not move in some others? Do we have any idea?
Yes, we do. We do. And this is the fundamental, the key question that you are raising. So, whenever you get a virus, you get a common cold or any virus you get, whether it's through the nose, throat, or you get it through your gut, the first response of the body, the first responder, are these proteins called interferons.
Interferons. Okay.
So the body produces, and the interferons are produced by the white blood cells, and it's also produced by the local cells in the nose and the mouth and the throat.
Okay.
And these interferons, they are of different classes, class 1, class 2, class 3 interferons. And these interferons, they stimulate our white blood cells to fight the infection. So they empower the white blood cells to fight the infection. And that's how we normally fight viruses.
They're sort of like the trumpet that sounds the charge. They identify there's an invader in the castle here, and they call out the troops.
Very true, very true. What is so peculiar about this disease? And now this we have known for over a year now,
Right.
that this is a very peculiar virus in that it suppresses the production of interferon. The body does not produce interferons in many patients. So if somebody gets the SARS-CoV-2 virus in their mouth and nose, they can have either of the two responses. Their body responds, it produces interferon, it fights off the virus, and the virus doesn't go down.
Right.
It stays here, you have a little fever, and you recover, your oxygen saturation stays fine, and you do just fine.
And it feels like the flu kind of thing.
Correct, correct. And then you have these other folks who don't mount an interferon response. And then the virus keeps on going down. It gets transmitted from cell to cell to cell and keeps on going down from the throat into the airways and down into the lungs.
Because we didn't produce these interferons to call out the white blood cell troops or whatever, or to fight this somehow, to fight this infection, when we could have done it easily in the upper respiratory.
Does the virus suppresses the interferon, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what he's saying. I didn't know that. The virus itself stops the body from reacting. So when does the body overreact then? Because that's when this storm that he talks about, that's when people die. That's when it turns into critical and we can't stop it.
Right. So once the person gets really sick, when the virus has gone into the lungs, it's gone to the other tissues, and then in about 5% of the hospitalized patients, only 5%, there is an overreaction by the body, and the cytokine storm occurs. So it's only in a minority of very severe COVID patients, largely those who are on the ventilator or requiring oxygen support,
Right.
that you have the cytokine storm. Majority of the hospitalized patients actually do not have a cytokine storm. And this is very elegant work done at Washington University, my alma mater, from a scientist, Dr. Mudd, who published this work. And indeed, this has been demonstrated by others. I'll tell you a little very important piece of work from University of Athens.
Athens in Greece? Okay.
Greece.
That is correct. That is correct. Yeah.
All right.
So these scientists, they compared patients with severe COVID and patients with influenza of comparable severity. So these are comparable patients in terms of their illness.
Right, because you can die from influenza. Some people have the same reaction. It gets down their lungs and they just can't stop it. So there is a mortality to influenza too, right?
Correct, correct. So when they looked at the cytokines, they were comparable.
Mhm.
between the two groups of
Right.
patients. What was remarkable was that patients with influenza were making interferons.
Oh,
They were making
They were
interference.
making,
Okay.
but the patients with COVID were not.
wow. Interesting. The the other thing I've noticed in the comparison between influenza and COVID, and this is a study done on with autopsies of the lungs
Hmm.
of both groups. So there's a group of patients who died from the flu, a group of patients who died from COVID. They autopsied the lungs of both groups. The group that died from COVID had multiple higher amounts of inflammation damage
Hmm.
than those with the flu. The lungs were markedly different with the amount of inflammatory damage from COVID.
Mhm.
Very interesting, although both groups died.
So I'm trying to see if I can translate this for the everyman here. So we've known for some time that if you're that this disease is suppressing these, what do we call them, interferons or something, these things that
Mhm.
interfere with the disease and call out the troops and kill it early on, and the disease itself is suppressing that. So that's how it can migrate. Your body can still react and can still fight it, and some people do. But if you don't, some people it migrates further, and now you're really severely sick. And of those that are severely sick, you're saying what 5% develop this storm, and that can be deadly. Often is deadly because once the storm starts, I guess there's nothing to. Is there nothing to stop the storm when it starts?
Well, so we can give them certain medications for the storm. So there are, steroids like dexamethasone, methylprednisone, but they can also get antibodies to certain cytokine storm components like IL-6. And then there are other drugs which can, what are called Janus kinase inhibitors, which can calm down the storm. But these are for a very small proportion of patients with COVID. My interest is that on that day one,
Right.
when a patient gets the virus and they have a little problem with their throat or
Mhm.
nose,
Mhm.
can they go to the pharmacy or can they go to Walmart? Can they pick up a drug off the shelf, a very safe drug, or get it prescribed and pick it up from the pharmacy, go home, take the drug, and have a milder course so that they are prevented from hospitalization.
And I thought that's what I just read that somebody's coming out with, which is the version of what's the thing you take when you get the cold and has like aluminum in it or something, and you think and it reduces the length of the common cold. I forget what that
Kind of like the Tamiflu
Tamiflu. That's what I'm trying to think
or
of.
the flu, something
Yeah, that's
similar.
sort of a Tamiflu for COVID in that you're still sick, but it will reduce it'll make it less severe and you'll get over it quicker.
Yeah, Merck's got some good data on I think it's Monoprovir, but the problem is it's a $700 medication for a 5-day course.
Oh, okay. All right. so,
Retail
so much
price.
for that. But that's what you're getting at, Dr. Gupta. You want to try and catch it early and reduce either the time it takes to get over this or the severity of it so it doesn't migrate and get into dangerous territory and among a small percentage turn into something deadly here.
That is correct. That is correct. So I want to tell you a little story.
We
My
love stories. We love stories here, so we're always looking for stories.
this is a personal story with a very happy ending.
Okay.
Very happy to share it with you. My mother, who's 87 years old,
Hmm.
she developed severe COVID. Her oxygen saturation went down to 82%,
Wow.
high fevers. She could not get out of bed, admitted to the hospital in India, treated with remdesivir and steroids, methylprednisolone. Did not help. Fevers continued. Still, the oxygen saturation was low. She just wanted to come home. We brought her home, still in a bad situation, not able to even move in the bed. What
Oh,
to say of getting out of bed?
Hmm.
Low oxygen saturation, fevers. We gave her 3 doses of this drug that I have been working on since March of last year, so 1.5 years.
Mhm.
Her fever went away and her oxygen saturation rose from 82% to above 90%.
Wow.
And my sister was contemplating taking my mother to the hospital. She felt so helpless, but there was a miracle. And my mother made a complete recovery. And if you look at the history of my mother, you would say that she would have the highest risk of death from COVID. She's a very frail lady. She had a cardiac arrest from coronary artery disease 5 years ago, for which she needed a stent.
oh boy.
She has kidney disease
Oh,
with her ejection, with her GFR. The filtration
Yeah.
is only 20% of normal. So she has all these risk factors and many others that I'm not telling you. But she not only survived from COVID, she's back to her normal self.
but we, the general public, aren't allowed to experiment like that. That was one of the frustrations. I think I hear this all the time from people with terminal diseases. Just give me something. I don't care if it's unproven. I got zero. I have little chance of surviving, like in your mother's case. She's got all the odds stacked up against her here. And because her son is a researcher here in the United States on some cutting edge stuff, she gets to try something. And your hunch what helped. You helped your
Tell
mother
us,
stay
tell us
alive.
about, yeah, tell us about this medication you're working on. I want to learn more about it.
Sure, sure. So let me go back to the interferon story
Yeah.
and my own personal story with this particular drug and how did I come up with this idea. So in March of last year, March of 2020, I was what was coming out in the media and what we were seeing was that elderly people were dying from the disease.
Yeah,
Young ones
frighteningly
were getting
so. Yeah, right.
frighteningly. So I looked at the literature and I found this work of Professor Stanley Perlman from University of Iowa, where he had infected mice with the SARS-CoV-1 virus, the virus in 2003.
Well,
Yes.
What
the other version of SARS that came out. Yeah, right.
Right. And he had this beautiful observation that all the young mice, they survived. And all the really old mice, they all died. And what he discovered was that there was a fundamental difference in how these mice react to the virus. Going back to the story we were talking about, how the body reacts.
Yeah.
The older mice produced a lot more of something called prostaglandin D2.
Mm.
So prostaglandin D2 is a very important prostaglandin in the nose, throat, etc. And it is produced from the fat, from the lipid in the cell membrane. So locally it is produced, and the elderly have much higher levels of PGD2, prostaglandin D2.
Okay.
It so happens that prostaglandin D2 suppresses the production of interferons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
So
that's from but I'm still trying to come up with a connection. Does the disease suppress the interferons, or is my age make me less likely to produce these interferons?
So it's a combination of those two.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
really astute of you to hit on that point.
Yes.
So
That's
by
what I'm
vir-
here to do. That's my
by virtue of our age, we in general with aging, we produce more prostaglandin D2.
Okay.
And then if we are hit by a virus, then the prostaglandin production increases further. And that
all of which suppresses the interferon, right?
interferon production. And interferon name comes from the fact that they interfere
That's
with
what I was guessing.
multiplication of
Right.
the viruses. Now, very interesting work from Professor Simon Phipps in Queensland, Australia, published in 2017, where he showed that with a different type of infection, if you block the effect of PGD2, you increase interferon production
Hmm.
Okay.
and you control that virus very effectively.
Ooh, so the key is to block prostaglandin D2 in order to make more interferon to fight the virus.
Correct.
I see. I
Correct.
see. I'm following you so far. Are you following him, Paul?
I think I am, but and what I'm not following is why have I not heard of this any time in the last year? I've heard about every other crazy, convoluted theory of how to fight this thing. I've never heard this clear a description of the process of how the disease affects your body. I've never heard this before. Why is this not front page news in the L.A. Times here?
Right, right. So when I discovered all this in March of last year, I approached NIH and I had meetings with them. I approached BARDA, which was set up to fund the
Yes.
research on these drugs.
Mhm.
BARDA said that they will fund my phase 2 trial with the drug
Okay.
and they will take over the phase 3 trials themselves.
Hmm.
BARDA went away.
It went
Oh,
away. The funding mechanism for this whole thing went away.
what
Went away.
happened?
Went away. What we heard through the grapevine is that the agency, the government, has stopped funding drugs that help the immune system fight the virus, the immunomodulators.
Okay.
The funding for immunomodulators went away sometime in the middle of last year. And
Wow.
that is inconceivable because this is a disease where the problem is with the immune system.
Yes.
So the obvious question is why? Why in the middle of this pandemic did we suddenly stop funding something that held promise to make people less sick, to keep it from? Why are we struggling to come up with an overall, particularly when we don't have a vaccine? I get that vaccines are profitable and vaccines are long-term solutions. I'm all for vaccines. But for a long time, we're struggling. We got no answers. Doctors were saying, I got no regimen. I got no prescribed way to do with this. I don't know what to do with these people other than hold their hand, maybe give them some steroids and a few other things here and try and fight the inflammation and hope that they can make it through this. You're telling me that early on of March of last year, not just your research, but the collection of research from around the world suggested a way to
Hmm.
battle this early on, and the funding mechanism from the federal government dried up. Why isn't that? That should be a shocking report in the New York Times tomorrow here.
We approached Operation Warp Speed
Yeah.
and we were working with them, but no moves were made. We were told to apply to this active program. We applied. We never received a formal communication from Operation Warp Speed, from NIH active program, from BARDA, no formal communication received. And the concept that I had proposed in March of 2020, that concept have been endorsed by two members of the National Academy of Medical Sciences. It has been endorsed by Professor Garrett Fitzgerald, who's the professor at University of Pennsylvania and the most famous name in prostaglandin research.
Hmm.
There is a lipid mediator storm in this disease. It is now well recognized that cytokine storm is in a minority of patients. It's very real, but in a minority.
Right.
But the main action here is that there is a lipid mediator storm. And this is the work of Professor Flamand and colleagues from University of Laval, Quebec.
And explain that. You're losing me again. Lipid mediator storm. So lipid is fat, and you're saying that the more fat you have, the more you produce this interferon that'll interfere with this?
No,
Or the opposite? No.
not quite. Not quite. So
You lost me. All right.
it's not, yeah, it's not ordinary fat. What we are talking about is that every cell has fat in its lining.
Okay.
The lining of the cell has fat.
That's the lipid.
That's the lipid. That fat, that lipid is mobilized and it makes very many different molecules.
Okay.
And these molecules, they have these cellular effects which lead to one of the molecules is PGD2, the other is thromboxane. PGD2 works through the interferon, suppresses interferon.
Right.
Yeah.
Other one, thromboxane, it promotes clotting.
It promotes clotting. Oh, okay. All right. Yikes. I got two problems. I'm not getting enough interference, and I got too much clotting on the back end here. Okay.
Right, right. So in this disease, just there are two buckets which are very important.
Right.
One is a maladaptive, a dysregulated immune response.
Yes.
The second is a profound clotting phenomenon.
Yes.
These are the two main problems. And this one drug targets the lipid mediator storm and targets these two critical processes.
So that we don't produce the lipids don't produce these molecules that suppress the interferon or lead to more clotting. That starts in the cell, the little bit of fat there, the lipid somehow produces these molecules that interfere with the interferon and lead to more clotting. All right. Okay.
I love the science here translated to English.
I tell you, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm translating it to English here. So you came up, you and others, it wasn't just your research. A lot of people started saying, hey, there's something happening here at a cellular level early on. If we can stop this from happening, we can keep the severity of this, we can stop this thing from turning into severe blood clotting and all the other stuff that happens here. And the government, you're telling me that the federal government, with Operation Warp Speed racing ahead, trying to find a cure, doctors desperate for anything to help me right now. I got patients dying. I don't know what to do with them. We don't know how to handle this and cure this. You're saying the federal government dropped the ball and stopped funding this and went in another direction. Why? Because the impulse was just to try and come up with a vaccine, and that's all the money and manpower they could muster? Or was there some, what possible reason would they not have to try and find something to interfere in this early on? I don't get it. Why would they stop it? Any theories? Any clues?
I can offer you my thoughts. So one is that that government correctly invested in vaccines.
Yeah.
Heavily invested, and it has borne fruit, but they should not have put all their eggs in one basket.
Right.
Because what if we had failed?
Yeah.
In terms of vaccines, HIV, we don't have a vaccine yet.
Right? Yeah, right. We don't. All these years later, it's true. For AIDS, we still don't have a vaccine for AIDS. That virus, right?
Right. And so that was, I think, the critical factor. The government put all its eggs in one basket, and they ignored a lot of other drugs, especially the old ones. So it was the official policy of Dr. Francis Collins, head of NIH, and he spoke about this in an interview with Dr. Sanjay Gupta on CNN, that we should be developing new drugs from scratch for this disease and not repurposing old drug. And the drug that I've been working on, the name is Remetroban. It has been used in Japan for allergic rhinitis. Allergic rhinitis, like a pill that you can pick up at Walmart, the Zyrtec and the Claritin.
Yeah.
Something of that type, something for allergic rhinitis, which is very safe.
Rhinitis is what? Something in your nose or something?
Runny nose.
Runny nose, right.
Runny nose and allergies.
Allergies.
And the sneezing you get.
Right.
And so this drug has been in use in Japan for the last 20 years. Very safe drug, and it targets the immune problem in the disease and targets the clotting problem in the disease. It is endorsed by all these scientists, including scientists within NIH also. The senior scientist, Dr. Ann Eakin, saying that this is very persuasive, that we should develop this. And yet the government sits on it, and we don't receive a single official communication.
This is shocking stuff. This shouldn't just be on OC Talk Radio. This should be on CNN. This should be on around the world, because not only are you talking about a big roll of the dice, and maybe it worked out well in the long run because they did come up with some vaccines that seemed pretty darn effective. But in the meantime, a lot of people died and a lot of people got really sick. And we could have, by repurposing some of this, either as a stopgap measure or as an additional weapon, we could have changed the course of this dramatically in a short period of time, because these drugs are already approved. They're already ready. We're just repurposing and reusing them and just testing them out a little further to make sure there's nothing else that we're not seeing here. While we're chasing all these other crazy ones, where did all this other stuff come? This hydroxychloride and all this stuff. Where did I don't even know where this stuff popped out of. What medical research prompted some prominent politicians, including the president, to start endorsing things that in the end seemed to have, because wasn't there something in the Lancet or something, the British Medical Journal, that first suggested maybe this drug can help, and they just latched onto it, and then later on, no, there doesn't seem to, in fact, it seems to be dangerous to use it. Where did some of these other, they leapt at some of these other ideas, why didn't they leap at yours?
But now we are dealing with another problem, which is long-haul COVID.
Yes, that was my last question here. Now, that's under the radar. This show talks about it a lot, but most people it's out there, but don't talk about it too much. Let's just get through the problem today. Let's not worry about the long haul here. And I think that's going to come back in a big way.
A huge issue, long haul.
Right. But long-haul COVID is not something of future. Long-haul COVID is here now. What is happening is that all these hospitalized patients who have come out of the hospital with COVID, many of them have scarring in the lungs.
Yes.
They get short of breath when they walk a little bit. Their energy level is low. They still have brain fog, if you will.
Yeah.
They don't have the initiative to do things like they used to. And this is long-haul COVID.
And they can't smell for some reason.
Indeed. That usually comes back after some time, but when there is scarring in the lungs, it can get better with time, but it may not. And these patients can be left with significant disability for a long time to come. Interestingly, as there is this lipid mediator storm in the lungs, this particular drug, Remdesivir, it has been shown that in another disease where there is a lipid mediator storm,
right,
this prevents lung fibrosis and reduces lung fibrosis.
So the third benefit, it not only helps fight, it not only stops this storm from happening and keeps the blood clotting from developing, it also, you're saying, helps reduce the scarring of the lung?
Wow.
Indeed.
Wow.
So if I had COVID,
Yes.
if I had COVID, the very first day I will get Remdesivir and I'll take one tablet of Remdesivir twice a day. In Japan, it only costs 60 cents a day.
Oh,
What?
Today.
that's the problem, I think, Doctor. I don't want to be cynical here, but it only costs 60 cents a day here.
No one can make money off of that, right?
Give me a little aspirin to reduce the clotting, and give me one of these pills that people are using to fight colds and runny noses, and maybe I won't get really sick, and
Well,
we don't need all the rest of this stuff. I mean, we still need vaccines. I get it, but you're blowing my mind. I mean, this is mind-boggling stuff. Do you realize what a bomb thrower you're being this morning here? How revolutionary this sounds here?
well, it still needs to go through the phase 3 clinical trials, right? It's not something that we're claiming this is going to cure COVID. It needs the clinical trials. The issue is the funding isn't there from the government to pursue medications that are already approved, that are cheap and inexpensive.
And even though what I'm hearing is not just his research, but other research says this is real possibility. This is something worth investigating, and people at high levels are saying, yeah, I get it. There's enough anecdotal evidence here, even his mother's case, to suggest further research on this. And they decided, why bother? We're just putting all our eggs in one basket. We're just going to cure this thing once and for all, and we don't need any sort of treatments along the way. But people will still get sick, and in the meantime, we'll develop blood clotting, this lipid storm or whatever you call it here, that your body overreacts, and you might get a lung scar and be scarred for life here. So maybe we need both. Maybe we need some treatment early on as well as a long-term vaccine to keep us from getting sick. That's what I'm hearing. Is that correct? We need both.
Indeed, indeed. So I think we need vaccines. We need an antiviral drug like molnupiravir from Merck, which may be coming out.
Which reduces the severity of it, right?
Yes, it fights the virus directly. It actually produces mutations in the virus, and it produces so many mutations that the virus dies.
Wow.
It mutates out of existence here, right? Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. And the risk is that this drug can produce mutations in our cells of the body as well. And therefore, there's a real risk of cancer down the road.
Oh my goodness! So I mutate the virus, but I might be turning my body into a mutant here. I might turn on to be a zombie apocalypse, like Dr. Trin's always worried about
like
here.
zombie
I'm
apocalypse.
mutating, right? Seriously, you're saying mutate into cancer? Other things can mutate in your body here. Yeah.
So just going back to that point, we need an antiviral drug to attack the virus. We need an immunomodulator to boost our immune response to the virus, produce more interferon. We need a clot buster, which will reduce the clotting, and we need drugs that will reduce lung fibrosis and help long COVID. So this has to be a multi-pronged approach to this disease.
And
We
you're
just
saying that
cannot-
because of, is it limited funding or limited resources, or it's just hard to manage multiple paths, so they just pick one and say we're going to bet on that horse? We can't bet on all the horses in the race. We got to pick one. Is it that simple?
I do not know what forces and how all these decisions are made.
That's above your pay grade here. Okay.
All I can say is this drug, Remetroban, has a huge potential to help millions of patients all over the world because it's a very inexpensive, safe medicine. And please get in touch with me if anybody would like to collaborate. I have a patent on this, but I have pledged a royalty-free license to any government in the world.
Royalty-free license. There you go.
If they would like to develop this drug and make it available free of charge to their...
How much do you need to do the third clinical trial? How much money? I mean, maybe Dr. Trin and I can scratch. I got a couple bucks on me here today.
Yeah.
Maybe we can all start a GoFundMe campaign here, and we'll all see if we can fund this. No, it's more than that, I assume. How much money does it take? I mean, what are we talking about? Is it $1 billion, $1 million, $500,000? What's it take to get through the next phase to find out if your anecdotal, strong, suggestive evidence is true?
We need to do 3 clinical trials. We need about $25 million.
Wow. Wow.
So
Just for-
$25 million is standing in the way of you and proving whether or not this is really true or not. Having conclusive evidence. There's strong evidence to suggest it's true. You want the final clinical trial proof that the FDA requires.
Phase 3.
Phase 3. Well,
Wow.
I wish
25 mil.
I wish
Wow.
we could go further. I have to stop this because I have to go. We're doing another show this morning with supervisor. Lisa Bartlett is doing a show in a few moments here with Neil Kelly, the Orange County Registrar of Voters, on the safety of elections. That's what another thing everybody's worried about. Why are we so worried about safe elections? So that's going live in just 5 minutes here. Give us a real quick summary of how people can reach out to you if they need you, and then we'll wrap this up. How do they reach you, Dr. Gupta?
They can reach out to me on my email, kidneydoc789@gmail.com.
Kidney doc. Okay, kidney doc. I like that.
I'm a kidney doctor.
Okay.
So kidneydoc789@gmail.com. And
9@gmail.com. Got it.
I'll respond to every email that I receive.
Well, we're going
It's
to
my
try
pleasure.
and blast this out in a big way because you're onto something here, and we need to. This story can't stay quiet here. We
Oh,
want.
the Facebook folks want to know, how do you spell this medication you're talking about? How do you spell it?
It's Ramatroban, so it's Ramatroban.
Okay, but it's not available in the United States.
It is not. It's only available in Japan.
So if you get sick, fly to Japan and go
Fly
buy
to
this
Japan
stuff.
if you get sick for this Ramatroban, which still it has good science behind it, and it still needs to go through the phase 3 studies to show that it works, of course. But 25 mil stands between that. Wow, that's crazy. This is why the drug companies are the only ones coming out with meds, because they have 25 mil.
To
Nobody
throw
else
at it.
does,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we could get 25 million. Come on, Dr. Trin. We can raise 25 mil here.
Yeah.
Let's do our own clinical trial. All
I'd
right.
love to have you come back, Dr. Gupta.
Love to have you come on, really, because this is more. This is really something. You just opened the door. Well, I don't want this to be the close the door on this. I don't want it to be like the government say, well, that was an interesting idea. Let's move on to something else. I want to keep talking about this. So
Yes.
thank you for coming on today here. And I'm sorry we have to cut you short, but it's fascinating stuff. You planted the seed. Let's see what sprouts out of it here.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, folks. Well, there you have it. Another great reason to tune in each and every time to Health Talks with Dr. Trin, where we talk about the cutting edge ideas, the stuff not being discussed, to give you some informed ideas about how you can face the health crises of today. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, streaming live from the University of California, Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.